I love the size, I love the design, I love what it stands for, love it. It's almost like they took my body and just went, well, let's shrink wrap a car around him.
It's funny, you know, Porsche have this excellent reputation for engineering excellence, but we've all heard the stories about bore scoring and catastrophic engine failures from IMS bearings.
These things prove that power means nothing when it comes to just enjoying a driving experience. You might think what I'm about to say is a completely ridiculous statement, but the 997 generation of 911, especially in Carrera S trim, might just be the greatest 911 of all time. And that means it's potentially one of the greatest performance cars of all time. I'm not saying it's perfect. We'll take you through all of the common issues and complaints, and we'll show you how they're aging and what they're like to drive and live with in a moment. But even though the interwebs want you to believe that you need the latest, greatest GT3 RS or some 1970s air-cooled masterpiece or whatever other pinnacle model, could this actually be peak 911? But we do need to start with one of the major issues that impacts so many 911s, and that's just understanding the bloody range. Just when you think the Toyota Hilux or Ford Ranger model range is confusing with their dozens of variants and configurations, compared to the 997 generation of Porsche 911, well, they're a walk in the park. But don't stress, because when it's explained properly, yeah, it's not rocket surgery. First of all, while we are talking about the Porsche 911, the 997 marks the 6th series of the iconic model, and it has been available in narrow or wide-body Targa, Cabriolet or Coupe body styles, depending on the specific model. However, the 997 can be split into either the Series 1 or the Series 2. And while visually they look nearly identical, short of the LED tail and daytime running lights and a few other minor aesthetic changes, under the sheet metal, plenty changed. The engines were heavily revised, transmissions were changed, suspension was recalibrated, and the entire package received a thorough going over. And then we come to the various models, and this will define the engine package and therefore the levels of intent. For the vast majority of people, a Carrera or Carrera S is all of the 911 you'll ever need. However, if it rains a lot where you live or you like going to the snow, the Carrera 4 and 4S might be a better option. If you are financially abundant, appreciate understated styling and have little regard for your license, check out the Turbo. But if you have no regard for your license, well then make it a Turbo S. If you've also got cash to burn, maybe appreciate understated styling and the special things in life, but you do value your license, well maybe check out the Carrera GTS. If you plan on attending the odd track day and you take your lap times pretty seriously, maybe get a GT3. If you plan on attending as many track days as possible and you base your sense of self-worth on your lap times, well then make it a GT3 RS. And if you're potentially a psychopath and have little regard for your own well-being, well maybe it's time for a GT2 or GT2 RS. However, we are talking Porsche here, so all of those were totally customizable with a whole bunch of different option packs, including things like the X51 power kit for all of the S models, to carbon ceramic brakes, to even color-coded leather-wrapped air vents. And then you have the special edition models like the Sport Classic and the Speedster, not to mention the greatest 997 of them all. Actually, you know what? Arguably one of the greatest cars of all time, the GT3 RS 4-litre. And then obviously, thanks to this enormous range of different models and variants and whatnot, the pricing also follows suit. The very cheapest examples are asking about $70,000, which interestingly is about $100,000 less than the current BMW M4. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the most expensive, let's say realistic ones, so manual turbo, they're asking around about $280,000. Obviously, when you get into the more collectible models, GT3, GT3 RS, GT2, often figures of $250,000 to $500,000 are being asked. And the seriously special stuff, like the GT3 RS 4-litre or even the Sport Classic, well, $600,000 to $1 million can be easily achieved. However, even though a lot of those cars offer potentially a really good investment opportunity, that's where the argument for these really starts to shine, because these things are potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars less than lots of those, and they offer pretty much the same thing, because these range from about $100,000 to $170,000. But then again, at that price, it opens up a whole bunch of very tempting other options. BMW M2 and M4, AMG C63S, Jaguar F-Type, Lexus LC500, Audi RS5, or even R8, Aston Martin V8 Vantage, Nissan GTR, Toyota Supra, even a far newer Porsche Cayman or Boxer is an option. The list just goes on and on. But no matter which sexy performance car you're looking at buying, if you're looking to finance it, you could potentially save yourself thousands by hitting the Driver link down below. Driver will take all of the hard work out of finding the very best finance package customized to suit your needs. They'll get you different quotes from loads of different lenders. The entire quoting process is fast, free, and it has no impact on your credit score. And you can have the cash in your account in no time. See for yourself, hit the Driver link down there. Now, with how diverse the 997 range is, if we were to delve into all of of the details of every single incarnation, we'd be here for bloody days. So in this video, we're just going to be focusing on, let's say, the more attainable models. We'll cover GT3s and RSs and Speedsters and all the special stuff when one of you lends us one. Or maybe when we become proper YouTubers and can afford to buy one. Anyway, that brings us to our test car here, the Carrera S, which the eagle-eyed of you will see is not exactly standard. It features the optional 997 Aero kit, which interestingly looks a whole lot like the front bar off a GT3. Not a bad thing. Also has aftermarket wheels on it. But the thing that really strikes you, if you haven't seen one of these in the metal for a long time, is just how small they are. In fact, this shares a very similar footprint with the Mark 7 Volkswagen Golf GTI. And that's important because the newer models have all bloated out, they're all huge. This one at least retains all the usability and fun that comes with the small proportions of the classic 911. Now, design-wise, personally, this is my all-time favorite of all of the 911s. I love that it's still obviously a modern car, yet still shares loads of the classic 911 design cues, unlike the 996, at least this one has round headlights. Also, these lend themselves so nicely to intelligent modifications. I love the size, I love the design, I love what it stands for, love it. However, unfortunately, it's not all good news. There are a few areas for concern, starting with the intakes. To be more accurate, it is actually what's hiding behind the intakes. These are the air conditioning condensers, and the problem here is that leaves and crap from the road just collect up in there, and eventually that causes corrosion. And being a Porsche, the replacement parts are not going to be cheap. You know what, that's actually a statement you're going to want to get used to in this video. Also in this area, don't be surprised if the previous owner or two have actually had the front bar completely resprayed. Just make sure that it has been done to Porsche levels of quality. Also, just make sure that all of the panel gaps everywhere match, especially on anything that opens and closes. Look, chances are owners won't cut corners when it comes to fixing these, but it is a rear engine performance car. Things can go wrong, so just check for any signs of accident damage. Actually, you know what? It's critical to find out as much as you can about the vehicle's history. For one of these things to retain their value, the provenance is critical. That's why you have to get a pre-purchase inspection done and get a vehicle history check. Those vehicle history checks, they are available at ReDriven.com. Also, there's a link down there. But just on the pre-purchase inspection, please get one of these. Yeah, it might cost you a few $100, but in the long run, it could save you thousands. You have to get one. Now, back to common issues with the exterior. There are a few reports of issues with the power window mechanism or the switch failing, and it means that the glass doesn't do this when it opens and closes. The problem with that is it's a higher risk of the actual glass cracking. But the good news is, if you're into DIY projects, this is a pretty enjoyable job to fix. It's cheap and pretty easy. If you need instructions on how to do that, go to the owners groups. There are plenty of links to excellent tutorials. Actually, worst case scenario, this regulator issue can basically mean that the window doesn't open and close at all. Now, if you're looking at a Targa model, just make sure that the roof mechanism doesn't rattle or make any weird noises or creak, especially if you're going up like an steep angled driveway, anything like that. And also with the Cabriolet models, just make sure that that whole roof mechanism actually works smoothly without any weird noises. Also, make sure that the car locks and unlocks with the roof closed and open. Also, on anything except the hard tops, just make sure that all of the drainage channels have been cleared, because there are some reports of water leaking into the cabins with these if the drainage channels aren't cleared, and that can cause all sorts of electronic issues. Speaking of electronic issues, make sure that the front mechanism or actuator actually works, because a few owners mentioned that it stops working and then you can't get in the frunk. Now, this one's specifically for the 997.2 generation. Plenty of owners have complained that condensation can build up in the taillights. The good news here though is that because these share so many components, you can often pick up a used taillight a whole lot cheaper than a brand new OEM one. Okay, now common complaints inside. It's pretty common for the rubber coating on the buttons to come away. This is actually called de-vulcanizing. Sounds cool, it isn't. Now, this has no impact on the actual usability of the buttons, but it can look a bit cheap and nasty and just feels a bit sticky and gross. Bit like me. Next up, many of the owners claim that the original 997.1 infotainment systems these days are just completely shit. The 997.2, it does update the tech, but even it is really starting to feel its age these days. Now, the sort of good news here is that Porsche do offer an official retrofit infotainment system that gives you Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all the modern features and technology. The only issue is, according to many owners, that official Porsche infotainment system doesn't allow the operation of the reversing camera, which is really weird. Aside from that though, if you can live without the reversing camera, just having an official Porsche infotainment system therefore comes with all of the Porsche factory support, and that's a good thing. And obviously if you do need a reversing camera, you can do what the original owner of this car has done and fit an aftermarket head unit system, but please use a quality item. It is a Porsche 911. You want a good system, not some cheap, nasty piece of crap. Next up, make sure you press every single button and make sure everything works. Chances are it's going to. We couldn't find any one big electrical issue with the interior, but there have been a few reports of window switches not working, HVAC switches not working, things like that. Again, chances are it'll probably work, just make sure it does. Also, look, it's fantastic that Porsche used really supple, high quality leather for the interiors. However, a few owners claim that this interior leather, it's not the most resilient and it can crack and tear pretty easily, and even the foam in the bolsters of the seats, especially on the entry bolsters, that can wear away pretty easily. Now obviously this can be fixed by getting the car just reupholstered, but if you want to get that done at Porsche levels, it's going to be expensive. Actually, just on all of the owners, a massive thank you to all of the owners groups and forum members that helped us research this video, and especially Auto House Hamilton here in Chatswood in Sydney. They are the Porsche specialists for Australia, and they helped out so much with the research for this. But look, back to the interiors, and as far as the resilience does go in this particular example, obviously everyone is going to be different depending on the life they've led. But in this has got nearly 100,000 Ks on it. It is used all the time. Fantastic for wear and tear. The leather still feels really, really nice. All the door cards, all the plastics in here, they're all soft touch, but they haven't scratched at all. It just feels fantastic. Even the steering wheel, there's still texture on the leather on the steering wheel. That's pretty rare. I can't get over nearly 100,000 Ks in here, and it feels, I'm not going to say it feels new, but bloody hell, it's close to it. Elsewhere inside, as far as the ergonomics and the seating position goes, typical for Porsche, this is perfect. It's almost like they took my body and just went, well, let's shrink wrap a car around him, and this is it. Honestly, it's if you've never sat in one of these, you have to do it because it just feels so perfect. Also, it feels compact in here without being claustrophobic. It just feels like a sports car or a performance car should. I adore this interior. Although there is one thing I personally would like to change. I prefer the single piece GT3 or GT3 RS kind of racing seats. Cal will put a photo of one of those up now. In saying that, I know these visually don't look anywhere near as supportive as the actual, Recaro style racing seats, but you'd be surprised. These are super supportive seats and also really comfortable on long trips. Maybe it's just me that likes the Recaro style seats. I get if you like these ones better. Even in terms of the overall design, there's so many little Easter eggs that hark back to the original 911s, and it works a treat. It's also aging really well. I don't think it looks old in here. It doesn't look current, but it's just bloody great. However, the 911 is supposed to be usable every day. Is it? In terms of practicality, my God, yes it is. Here we go. You have a box specifically designed for your Porsche Motorsport cap just there. I think the best cup holders in the entire automotive world because they're hidden under here and they just slide out like that, and they're just enjoyable to use, and they do hold small pretentious coffees like espressos and piccolos, the ones I enjoy. You're thinking, hang on a sec, 911 shit because it hasn't got door bins. Oh, it does. They're hidden under the armrest, so you've got door bins there. You've got a spot sort of okay for your phone just here. If you've got a larger phone than this, it might struggle to get in there. There's a little slot to capture all the stuff that falls off your feet when you get into the passenger seat just here. It also has a spot for a cigarette lighter and an ashtray. Luckily, the ashtray is now filled with the adapter cables for the head unit. Also, cubby bin here, next to your coin tray, just there. And that's it, no sunglasses holder up there. There's obviously nothing under the seats, nothing down there. But come on, for a performance car like this, that is excellent practicality. Now, as far as what equipment and features you're going to get, well, look, that is really going to vary and will be dependent on what option boxes the original owner ticked. But at the bare minimum, Australian Carrera models come with a 13-speaker Bose sound system, climate control, leather upholstery, and all of this and more. However, as we mentioned before, the list of possible optional extras in here are seemingly endless, and depending on how deep your wallet is, you could pretty much have whatever you wanted. Cars fitted with things like Porsche's active suspension management or sports chrono packs, or really any serious custom features often do ask a premium. And it might be worth actually spending that premium when buying used, because the more money you spend now, it's probably going to be returned back to you when you sell the car. If you sell the car, probably shouldn't sell the car. Now look, obviously we don't expect you to remember all of these features and the list of everything that goes wrong. But to make all of that stuff really easy to refer to, we've listed it all on our free 911 997 cheat sheet at ReDriven.com, and the link's down below. It is basically the ultimate used 997 buyer's guide. Okay, now in the back seat, I'm exactly 8 centimeters taller than famed Porsche collector and iconic comedian Jerry Seinfeld. This is in my driving position, and as you can see, hugely spacious back here. I am so comfortable. It doesn't feel claustrophobic at all. The seats are very comfortable, good amount of headroom, good amount of leg room. It's great. Obviously not. Get me the hell out of here. Let's wrap this bit up as quick as we can. But as far as wear and tear back here in this particular car, yeah, none. You'd be crazy to sit back here. And as far as practicality back here, actually not too bad. There are some map pockets. There's a little storage cubby hole under my calf muscle, and also the seats do fold flat to give you even more storage area. You can put things up here, here, under here. It is really the everyday usable performance car, unless you want to sit in the back, and in that case it's like a torture chamber. Now, as far as practicality in the front goes, actually pretty good. In fact, the rear-wheel drive versions of these have about 135 litres of space, which is, I reckon, 2/3 of me. The all-wheel drive versions, they reduce down to 105 litres, but that's still about half of me, so still pretty good. Also, there are little storage cubby holes here and here behind the CD changer and whatnot. It's honestly really good for practicality. While we're on the topic of sensible stuff, let's talk safety. And despite the fact that this is a performance car with the engine and all of that weight hanging back over the rear wheels, as long as you don't drive like a dickhead and also don't turn off that stability control button, these are actually pretty safe. But to take you through the safety features that you can expect in an attempt to make this bit more entertaining, we're going to have German Jerry Seinfeld tell you what it's like.
Was soll das für ein Problem mit nur 4 Airbags? Ich meine, sicher, es hat ein Anti-Blockiersystem, elektronische Stabilitätskontrolle, Traktionskontrolle und Sicherheitsgurte vorne mit Gurtstrafern und Lastbegrenzern, und die Allradmodelle waren auch mit Bremsvorfüllsystem und Bremsassistent ausgestattet, aber wenn sie bei hoher Geschwindigkeit verunglücken, werden sie sicherlich durch die Airbags geschützt.
Now, before we get into the common complaints when it comes to the driving experience, we have to say a massive thank you to Brett for lending us his pride and joy. Brett is actually currently standing over behind us right now. And as a thank you present, we're going to be giving him a set of these bad boys, WiperTech wiper blades. But so the rest of us don't miss out, if you want 15% off and free express shipping on a set of these bad boys, hit the link below. These things are so easy to order, they're easy to fit, and they work so well that we use them on all of our cars. WiperTech legends. Okay, common complaints and issues with the driving experience, and the first big one is that if the previous owner or owners haven't kept up the maintenance, you might hear and feel a few clunks and weird noises coming from the suspension. Or it might even feel a bit unstable, especially over bumps if the suspension's loaded up, like mid-corner. Now, chances are this is just the suspension bushes on their way out, and the good news is it's not a complex job and it's pretty affordable to fix. And besides that, no, that's about it for common complaints when it comes to driving. You know, it's funny, right? People online will bang on about lap times and performance figures and power outputs and all that sort of stuff. But find a really good 997 with a manual gearbox, and even, I'm talking base model Carreras, if you know how to steer, these things prove that power means nothing when it comes to just enjoying a driving experience. Like, don't get me wrong, this is still a bloody fast car, right? Like, anything I can do 0 to 100 in under 5 seconds is plenty rapid enough, but forget all that because you're hardly ever going to do it. But what you will do all of the time is drive around in the real world at legal speed limits, just like this, and that's where this thing just excels. There are thousands of hours of videos on YouTube of these things being pushed to their absolute limit, but in these scenarios, like the way you're going to be driving all of the time, this thing, it offers that perfect balance between all the old school air-cooled 911 charm, but with just the right amount of modernity. Actually, you know what? With the newer models, with more and more tech all of the time, I think that's where this thing is, that's why this is really starting to shine. I mean, the steering feel, the pedal weight, the feeling of the shifter, granted this has got a GT3 short shift, so that certainly helps, but just the way everything feels in the hand and against your feet and the sense through your bum and your back, it's an incredible combination. It's like the automotive equivalent of an incredibly tight band. Plus, when you combine all of that with the compact dimensions and the excellent vision out of it, even doing things like reverse parking and just dealing with traffic actually become enjoyable. But we've forgotten arguably the most important element, and that's the person actually driving it. And that's where the 997 just nails it. Yes, this does have enough safety tech to keep you out of trouble, but you never feel like you're removed from the mechanical goings on. In fact, this car, it has genuine personality. It's like it's trying to be your best four-wheeled friend, and it feels like it has your back all the time and just encourages you to have fun with it. Actually, it feels like the very best Mazda MX-5, just with more of all of the best bits. However, there is potentially another negative about driving the 997, which unfortunately it can dilute the overall driving experience. And that's the, let's say, mechanical concerns that surround things like IMS failings and bore scorings and all that sort of stuff. Is there any truth to all of that? Well, look, unfortunately, I can't answer that because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who can answer it, because they are? It's Jim.
I'll start with the IMS bearing on these. Yes, they can fail, and yes, they can destroy an engine, which can cost more than the car's value to repair, blah, blah, blah. We've heard it all before. But if you look beyond the hysteria, it's actually a very small percentage of 997s that actually fail like that. And if it was replaced as a maintenance item or a preventative maintenance item, which a lot of them have been, you're extremely unlikely to have any issues with it. You're also less likely to have issues if it's had an excellent service history. And apparently, it's good for them if you just take it out and giving a thrashing every now and then. The theory there is that the bearing is better lubricated at higher RPM. If you want to get it replaced as a preventative maintenance item, well, the early model manuals, they can start about $4,000 to change. The later models with an automatic, with an upgraded bearing, that can cost up to about $8,000. Which is, you know, not so bad when you compare it to the price of a replacement cylinder head on a Ford Ranger. It's actually cheaper. And it's a similar story with the bore scoring that causes the oil consumption. It is totally blown out of proportion. It's actually only the very early models that are most affected, although there are cases in later models too. But again, yeah, not as common as the internet would have you believe. Cars with a bore scoring issue, and apparently on the left-hand exhaust pipe, you can actually tell whether they have a bit more soot around the exhaust pipe, and that's because the left-hand exhaust is a crossover from the right-hand bank, and the cylinder 5 and 6 on the right-hand bank are the ones that are most affected. Oil leaks on these, yeah, they do have them. The rear main seal occasionally. Usually though, it's the spark plug tubes that are leaking the worst. And the air-oil separator system on these, that's a series of pipes and breathers that goes across the whole engine basically. The pipes break and the seals leak, and you can have issues with that. It can cause the engine to run poorly, and it can actually cause, on occasions, big plumes of smoke coming out the back when you start it up. It's actually quite simple and cheap to repair, considering how bad it actually looks. Coolant leaks on these, the worst offenders there are the expansion tanks and the water pumps especially. They're a pretty common problem. There's a couple of crossover pipes that are up above the steering rack area. Those pipes can corrode and the fittings can break and they can leak. Now the worst part about that is you've got to drop the cross member to get them out. Not a hugely common problem, but a pain in the arse to fix. Fun fact on these, there are about 35 coolant hoses. So if you've ever got an issue like from a blown head gasket or something like that, where you get contamination in the cooling system from the oil and you have to replace all those oil affected softened hoses, well, that can get very time consuming and very expensive. The brakes on these, look, they do wear quickly, especially if you're driving it in the way it's designed to drive. Suspension components, the control arm bushers do wear out prematurely, and they're a bit of a service item, so about every 40 to 60,000 Ks you'll need to do them. The tandem pump, that's the vacuum and scavenge pump on the back of the cylinder head on the right hand side. That can fail and leak oil, and in wet climates too, that can actually rust from the outside in and cause issues. Typically only wet climates though. Transmissions in these, they're all actually pretty good. The early Tiptronic, pretty stout unit. The manuals are good too, and the PDK's overall pretty good, although the PDK, if you do have a problem with it, it is by far going to be the more expensive one to fix. Mechanically on these, the differences between the 997.1 and .2, personally, I think it's probably worth spending the extra money on the .2 if you can afford it. Now, I have to give a shout out to all of the Porsche specialists that helped out with the information for this, especially Steve from AutoWorks in Wyong. Thanks for your help.
Remember that ridiculous statement I said at the start of the video that the 997 Carrera S is the greatest 911 of all time? Well, if you're buying one, yeah, it is. Obviously with a car like a 911, it is critical to have a full pre-purchase inspection carried out, ideally with a specialist. But if it does tick all of the boxes and it has had any potential issues already seen to, should you buy one? Yeah, oh my God, yes you should. But why should you buy one of these over all of the others? For the majority of people, the likes of the GT3, GT2 and RS models are now so unattainable, very few will actually be driven in the way they were intended. Unfortunately, they seem to have become more valuable as an appreciating asset in an investment portfolio than they are a wonderful car that you can push to the limit at every available opportunity. A turbo, well, it might be appealing, but when you take into account how quickly you can lose your license and possibly your car thanks to our police force and road rules, on Aussie roads, haven't they just become way too fast to actually exploit their abilities? So therefore, what's the point? The Carrera 4 and 4S are brilliant, but in a climate like Australia, and with how capable the Carrera S is, do you really need the all-wheel drive grip? And that leaves us with the standard Carrera, which is honestly all the 911 you'll ever need. But just knowing that you have the slightly spicier version, that is very nice for your ego. For me, this isn't just the best 911 that you could possibly buy, but it's arguably maybe the best performance car you could ever buy. However, for tens of thousands of dollars less, you could buy one of these instead. But if you weren't to buy this or this, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. Should you buy one? Oh my gosh, Now with her, however, a 911 is supposed to be usable every day. Supposed to be?